We wanted our entrance to say welcome, but wouldn't any church say that? We had some particulars to the welcome we wanted to make. We wanted the stranger we were welcoming to feel touched by beauty, and we wanted the stranger we were welcoming to know, like it or not, that we meant to carry on Gregory of Nyssa's kind of Christian humanism. But our first draft of this door had it on the far side of the building.
We'd been renting another church's chapel and were frustrated at how great an experience we felt we could have offered people if we'd been allowed to shape and landscape the courtyard entrance. We'd come to love the sweeping curves of the wrought iron gate with the cross dancing at its peak. On Sundays, and for our weeknight evening services, the gate was more threshold than barrier. Stepping through it, we felt ourselves entering a space of anticipation and promise. We talked often of wishing for more colorful flowers, for potted plants, for a warmer surface, like red-green flagstone instead of gray concrete. And we weren't as well tuned in as we might have been to the stranger's experience.
We were listening to a familiar space and an experience we all shared. Visitors did tell us that there was a moment of confusion as they approached the red door in this picture, the door they thought they'd be going through and that they'd hoped was open. It was always locked. We all knew the entrance was out of sight, just around the corner to the left. Charles Fulton, the priest-architect who was directing the Episcopal Church's building fund, critiqued our earlier drawings and helped us rethink our entrance. Most Episcopal churches I'm working with on remodeling have to cope with a hidden entrance. You're planning to make one. Don't do it. Make it speak its welcome to anyone driving by. Make it clear how to get into this church. So, these doors open directly to the gathering.
Just inside the doors on a Sunday, faces of people gathered informally in the rotunda, the faces of the saints overhead, and the faces of icons painted by parishioners offer the next level of greeting and welcome. Some visitors and strangers looking for a church do tell us that they notice the baptismal rock across the church as they pass through the doors. But it's not the threshold. Instead of another threshold, we offer faces in greeting.
For a typical Sunday liturgy, there may be 150 people gathered in the large open space around the altar table. The interior of this worship space is conceived as a community journey in a sense, but the journey will end back here where it begins, with the table holding the center and welcoming all. We borrowed and adapted the model for the liturgy's journey from Louis Boyer's account of early Christian buildings in his book Liturgy and Architecture, but it also echoes T.S. Eliot. What we call the beginning is often the end, and to make an end is to make a beginning. We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. The end is where we start from. What we call the beginning is often the end.
In the gathering space, people greet friends and strangers informally until clergy and vested lay assistants enter from the wooden door, slightly open in the photo. Together, after a prayer and a bit of singing, everyone walks in crowded procession, still singing, into the seating area, just visible to the right of the photo.
Everyone passes by the lectern, one side or the other, finding seats near the throne-like preacher's chair in front of the icon of St. Gregory of Nyssa preaching. We'll hear our Bible readings, including the Gospel, read from this lectern.
People find their way to sit facing others across the center axis of the room. For this part of the service, the choir is scattered throughout the congregation. We remain in this space where we can see one another's faces as we listen to readings, to the preacher, and offer our prayers for peace and God's work in the world.
Now the place of our beginning becomes our destination. We designed this building with space enough for all to move. Moving toward the altar table, each row of seats becomes a line of people, singing a hymn and dancing a simple step from Christian monastic tradition. The high open space of the rotunda that served as a resonance chamber behind the readers now welcomes our singing voices as we dance past the small forest of Ethiopian crosses. Some notice, and all feel, the new, bolder resonance to the congregation's voice in the more spacious, high-ceilinged room.
The font still beckons. If we're baptizing somebody, before gathering around the table, we dance our way to the outdoor baptismal font for the baptism. When we have a funeral liturgy, an interment of ashes, after Eucharist, the ashes and cross, lead a procession out past the font to the columbarium, niches behind the figure of the risen Christ. And he's there to remind us that Gregory of Nyssa boldly declared that the body of Christ is the whole of humanity. For a baptism or interment in the columbarium, the whole congregation goes to the place where we're doing the sacramental action, crowding in close, a chaotic crowd ordered by shared intention and the focus of our gathering.
And the same will be true as our dance to the altar table encircles it. The table's prepared, and now we share the peace as Christ is among us making peace. Everyone can move through the room to embrace friend and stranger.
In St. Gregory's earliest days, a congregation of about a dozen, growing slowly to 25 and then on toward 40, we were gathered in a single circle around the table. And the circle's growth kept moving everyone but the presider and assistants further away from the table. We'd made an unconscious geometric equation in which more people meant more distance and less intimacy, but the symbol felt powerful to us. We wondered whether to organize ourselves into concentric circles, and in the end, the truth of our chaotic, energetic gathering close to a center that we shared felt truer.
But this is a tour, not a liturgy, so we can pause to examine the table we designed to hold this center. On one side, we've carved a quotation from Luke, one that sounds so rough and critical in its original Greek that scholars believe we may be hearing the voice of Jesus' own critics from his life among us. This guy, this jerk, welcomes sinners and eats with them. And on the other side of the table, we carved these words from Isaac of Nineveh, 6th century bishop and teacher. Did not the Lord share the table of publicans and harlots? So then, do not distinguish between worthy and unworthy. All must be equal in your eyes to love and serve.
Communion comes to us all through the crowd wherever we are. It's offered, as Christ offered his fellowship at table, to all. So, to everyone present. And when we've tasted and seen the presence of Christ in another way among us, we complete our discoveries and the whole Eucharist with a final carol, that is, a danced hymn, and a small feast of sweets, savories, and coffee that comes out from the kitchen to the table. Another way we're back where we began. The powerful center of the altar becomes the simple center, a serving table, and our many conversations resume, but fresh from where we've been together and what we've done together. And from there, home, rest, work, and the practice of compassionate service and gratefulness that awaits us crossing again through the doors that welcomed us.